Hi, I am Elk.
And I am Joy. Welcome to Mind the Gap, a podcast where we bridge gaps in understanding through honest conversations about culture, identity, society, and everyday life.
Here, we believe difficult conversations don't have to divide us. With curiosity, empathy, and critical thinking, we strive to create a safe space for healthy dialogue and meaningful perspectives. Let's begin.
So, Elk, there's been some buzz about pageant kings who got canceled over things they said about halfies on social media. What exactly went down?
Recently, a couple of pageant kings found themselves in hot water after making comments on social media about halfies. The remarks sparked backlash online, with many people calling out the comments as insensitive and discriminatory. Critics felt that the statements were inappropriate, especially coming from title holders who are expected to represent and uplift everyone, regardless of background or ethnicity. Bottom line, they were canceled.
To be honest, I understand why many people were offended. Pageant title holders represent more than themselves. They become role models. Their words carry weight. So it's reasonable for people to expect them to be mindful of what they say. At the same time, I also believe it's important to understand the full context before judging someone. If they genuinely recognize their mistake, apologize, and learn from it, I think people should at least be open to giving them the chance to grow. How about you, Elk? What's your take on it?
Personally, I think the disappointment was valid. Filipinos are incredibly passionate about the three B's: boxing, basketball, and beauty pageants. These are areas where we've consistently rallied behind our representatives. So when a respected figure in the pageant community says something that feels dismissive of that support, of course people are going to react. What stood out to me, though, was how the conversation shifted. At first, people wanted accountability, which makes sense. But even after he publicly apologized, the criticism kept coming, and it started feeling less about the issue and more about the person. That's where it gets interesting to me. There's a real difference between holding someone accountable and just continuing to punish them. If someone has acknowledged the mistake and apologized, what are we still after? I don't think there's a clean answer, but it's worth asking whenever cancel culture comes up. But before we talk further, how do you define cancel culture?
Good question. So, cancel culture is basically when someone, usually a public figure, says or does something that a lot of people find offensive or problematic. The public then calls them out, and it often leads to them losing followers, opportunities, or even their titles and positions.
It happens a lot on social media, where things spread really fast. In the pageant world, title holders are held to a higher standard. So when they say something controversial, the backlash can be pretty intense. But have you ever canceled anyone before?
Honestly, no. I'm more of an observer than someone who joins cancel campaigns. I usually read what's happening and try to understand both sides before forming an opinion. If my friends bring it up, I'll share my thoughts during our conversations, but I don't usually post about it online or let it affect me too much. If it's something that doesn't contribute to my peace of mind, I simply choose to ignore it and move on. How about you? Have you ever canceled anyone before?
Yes, but mine is different. So I canceled two people. Their political views were different from mine, and whenever I see them online, I get stressed. So I decided to unfollow them for my peace of mind because I knew I was on the losing end. They do not know me, and they do not even know I exist. But there I was, feeling disappointed in them because of their political choice. So, again, for my peace of mind, I unfollowed them.
Did you leave harsh comments in their social media accounts?
I did not. But if this happened on the early stages of social media, I would have. I guess part of getting old is having control and knowing that leaving harsh comments will never do me any good. Plus, words are powerful, and people must always remember that. Our comments can hurt a person more in an unimaginable level. So, Joy, from your perspective, what do you think are the real effects of harsh comments on the person receiving them?
I think harsh comments can affect people more than we realize. We often forget that there's a real person behind the screen. Even if someone made a mistake, receiving thousands of negative comments all at once can be emotionally overwhelming. It can affect their confidence, mental health, and even how they see themselves. Of course, people should be held accountable for their actions, but there's a difference between constructive criticism and personal attacks.
That's a good point. And do you think the people leaving those comments even realize the impact they're having? Or is it more of an out of sight, out of mind thing for them?
I think for some people, it's definitely out of sight, out of mind. Because they're behind a screen, it's easy to forget that their comment is being read by an actual person. Others might get caught up in the crowd mentality, seeing everyone else criticizing someone and joining in without really thinking about the consequences. That's why I think we should always pause before we click post. We can express disagreement or hold someone accountable without being cruel. Once words are out there, we can't take them back. And we never really know how deeply they might affect someone.
That's such a good point about crowd mentality. It's like people get swept up in the moment and forget there's a real person on the other side. And what you said about accountability is interesting because that actually brings us back to something we touched on earlier. Where do you think the line is between holding someone accountable and just piling on? Because sometimes it feels like those two things start as the same thing, but end up in very different places. And more importantly, do people really push for change, or is it just a trend that blows over after a few days on social media?
I think it's a mix of both. There are people who genuinely want accountability because they hope the person learns from their mistake and does better. But there are also times when it feels like people are just following what's trending. Once a new controversy comes along, the attention shifts and the conversation fades. Real accountability shouldn't end with someone getting called out online. It should lead to reflection, learning, and positive change. Otherwise, it risks becoming just another viral moment instead of something meaningful. How about you, Elk?
For me, some people ask for accountability. They want the person they are canceling to apologize and be accountable. But is accountability what they really want? It makes me think, what do people actually want? Here's the thing about cancel culture. The cycle goes like this. Someone says something offensive, they get called out, they get canceled. Then they apologize, and people say, you only apologize because you got caught. So the cancellation continues. But what if they don't apologize? Same result. Cancellation continues. There is no winning move. No matter what this person does, the outcome is the same. And if there's no version of their response that actually stops it, then let's be real. This was never about accountability. Accountability has a finish line.
I think that happens sometimes. There are cases where no matter what a person does, even if they apologize or try to change, some people still won't accept it. At that point, it feels less like accountability and more like punishment. But I also believe every situation is different. If someone genuinely takes responsibility and shows real growth, there should be room to recognize that. Otherwise, we have to ask ourselves, are we helping people change? Or are we just refusing to let them move on?
Do you know anyone who got canceled and until now is still not forgiven by netizens?
Yes, I remember an influencer who went viral after a confrontation at a bar that eventually involved the police. The incident spread quickly online, and many people criticized how she handled the situation. Even though time has passed and she's continued creating content, that controversy is still brought up whenever her name comes up. It just shows how difficult it can be to rebuild trust once something goes viral. The internet has a long memory, especially when you're a public figure.
Who decides when someone has done enough to be forgiven?
I don't think anyone can decide that for everyone. Forgiveness is personal. What's more important is whether the person has genuinely taken responsibility, learned from their mistakes, and shown through their actions that they've changed.
Do you think social media has made it harder for people to redeem themselves?
Definitely. The internet never really forgets. Even if someone has changed, people can easily bring up old posts or past controversies. That makes it harder for them to move forward because they're constantly being reminded of who they were instead of being recognized for who they've become.
Joy, as we're recording this episode, a drag queen is once again in the spotlight because a video from an incident 3 years ago has resurfaced. What's your take on how people have responded?
I think people's reactions show just how powerful social media can be. Even though the incident happened 3 years ago, it quickly became a topic of discussion again after the video resurfaced. I understand why people wanted accountability, especially since public figures have influence. But I also think it's fair to ask whether the person has grown since then. If they've acknowledged their mistakes and shown real change, I believe that should be part of the conversation too, not just the mistake itself. Elk. As someone who's part of the LGBTQ plus community, what's your take on this issue?
That's a difficult one because we only have a limited view of what happened. The video is disturbing, and regardless of the context, it's clear that someone got seriously hurt. We shouldn't minimize that. At the same time, the drag queen involved says the incident happened 3 years ago and that it was already settled privately with the person involved. If that's true, then the question I'd ask isn't just what happened, it's also what happened after. Has she taken accountability? Has she genuinely changed? Because if someone makes a serious mistake but spends the years after learning from it, apologizing, and becoming a better person, I think that matters. Changed behavior should count for something. But if it wasn't truly resolved, or if accountability was never fully taken, then that's a different conversation. We have to ask why that responsibility wasn't fulfilled in the first place. And I think there's another person we shouldn't lose sight of in all of this. So much of the conversation is centered on the person facing backlash, but what about the person who was hurt? How is she doing today? Is she okay? Has she been able to heal from what happened? Because accountability isn't only about apologizing to the person hurt. It's also about recognizing the impact on the person who experienced the harm. That's the part I'd want us to remember. Behind every viral controversy is a real person whose life may have been affected long after the internet moved on. So, Joy, it's time to mind the gap. What do you want to say about cancel culture?
For me, cancel culture reminds us that our words and actions have consequences, and that's important. But I also believe accountability should come with the opportunity to learn and grow. We all make mistakes, and while we should be responsible for them, we shouldn't be defined by them forever. If someone is genuinely trying to become a better person, I think we should at least leave room for that possibility. What say you, Elk?
We talk a lot about canceling people, but we almost never talk about what happens after. Think about who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Are you the same person? Most of us would say no because people change. That's not a loophole, that's just how humans work. But cancel culture operates like change is impossible. Like whoever you were at your worst moment is who you are forever. And that's the part that doesn't sit right with me. If we actually believe people can do better, we have to leave room for them to do better. You can't demand accountability and then refuse to recognize when someone has actually done the work. So at some point, we have to ask ourselves, do we actually want people to change? Or do we just want them to disappear?
Before we officially end today's episode, we'd like to leave you with a few questions to reflect on. There are no right or wrong answers. We simply want to continue the conversation. Have you ever canceled someone? If so, what made you decide to do it? Do you think people deserve a second chance after making a mistake? Or are there actions that should never be forgiven? When does accountability stop being about growth and start becoming public shaming? And who gets to decide when someone has done enough to earn forgiveness? Most importantly, if cancel culture is meant to make society better, what does better actually look like to you? Is it about punishment, change, or something else entirely?
We'd love to hear your perspective. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're comfortable, tell us about your own experiences. We may feature some of your responses in a future episode. After all, meaningful conversations don't end when the episode does. They continue with all of us.
We want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts on today's topic in the comments below. Cancel culture is a conversation that affects all of us, and every perspective matters. Whether you agree, disagree, or just have questions, we want to read what you think. Just one reminder, this is a safe space for open, honest dialogue. We ask that you keep the comments respectful and constructive. Healthy conversation means we can challenge ideas without attacking people. Let's keep it that way.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next one. This has been Elk.
And Joy saying,
Always
always
mind the
mind
gap.
the gap.
Bye.
Bye.